Why do we forget? You meet someone new. You shake their hand. They say their name. You instinctively say yours. A few seconds later, you blush because you realized you already forgot their name. But then you're used to this. You have bad memory. Or do you? What if I told you you've simply been using your memory incorrectly, and that with a few simple changes, you could dramatically enhance your memory? And yes, I'm a mind reader. Right now, you're thinking, you've heard this all before. Random YouTube video, random YouTuber, empty promises about improving your memory. But as a qualified neuroscientist, even I can't believe what I've uncovered. I thought I knew how memory works. You perceive new information through your senses. It enters your short-term or working memory. Some mystical memory shenanigans occurs when you rinse and repeat the information, and then all of a sudden you have long-term memory. The shenanigans involves long-term potentiation and synaptic plasticity, but I won't bore you with the details. So where do we go wrong when we forget a person's name on initial greeting? Well, that actually reveals the first change we need to make, which is focus. You've heard the expression, in one ear, out the other. Well, that's exactly what happened. By not placing your attention on the name, you did not forget the name. You never encoded the memory to begin with. Now, this issue is really easy to fix. The best fix is to take your notepad and, what was your name again? Can you remind me? Oh, cool, that's your name. Thanks, I'll write that down. Okay, cool. If you write their name down, apart from appearing maybe socially a little bit awkward, because, who writes down a person's name? That's a bit strange. But if you had done this, you would have remembered their name with absolutely no problem. Now, I know it isn't always that practical to write down someone's name, especially if you don't have a pen and paper in hand. So what is the backup plan? We need to focus on their name and connect it to something familiar. Maybe it's Jennifer, the lady from HR, or Franklin, the guy that drives the BMW. The same applies to new words. You need to focus on breaking the word into syllables, and only then can it be effectively encoded into memory. Okay, so we need to place more effort into focusing when we seek to remember. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. The most critical aspect of memory formation has long been known in literature. Since 1885, in fact. A German psychologist by the name of Hermann Ebbinghaus, who had a passion for enhancing learning efficiency, did careful experimentation on his own memory to quantify the efficiency of learning the same information again and again over time, so repetition. He controlled the type of information being learned by taking random letters and grouping them into clusters. He then put in the time to revise the clusters of letters until he was confident that he knew them, and then he would attempt to relearn them as he forgot them over time. And during that process, he quantified the rate at which the human brain forgets. Now, surprisingly, our ability to remember newly learnt material rapidly decays. According to Ebbinghaus's original data, within about 40 minutes, you and I would have forgotten 50%. If you wait 8 hours after the learning, 65% was forgotten. By 2 days, as much as 75% was forgotten. Now, memory decay slowed around this point, with nearly 80% being forgotten after 1 month. Now, this brings us to the second most important change that you need to make to your learning process. Recency. Knowing that what you seek to learn rapidly decays, 50% vanishing within 40 minutes, that requires you to review quickly after the initial learning event. By necessity, schools and universities often organize their teaching sessions through weekly timetables. But memory formation doesn't abide by school timetables. Example, if you had a math class on a Monday and you only returned to do the homework on the Sunday, you're faced with a memory of a mere fraction of the learning material. And it can't just be me who remembers that being really difficult, having to completely reteach yourself the content because you've forgotten all of it. I never understood why, but now it all makes sense. Now, Ebbinghaus made conscious effort to memorize the letters. To that effect, he forgot, say, 25% of what he learned in 7 days. But in a classroom or a lecture theatre, you're not sitting there actively memorizing the learning material. In fact, You may not even be focused for the entire lesson duration. That brings your actual effective memory down to between 1 to 20%, in my opinion, 7 days post the learning event. Why is there such a wide range in memory retention? And does that even matter? Well, it turns out that the method you use to encode new information into your memory actually impacts your ability to recall over time. The better your encoding method, the better your recall of the information. Now, taking inspiration from Ebbinghaus, I used different memory techniques to encode the elements of the periodic table. And I took the challenge to maximum. I memorized 120, and I know it was only 118, but I found two predicted elements and added them to the list. A nice maximal challenge. Now, for the first 1 to 20 elements, I used a memory palace technique in the shape of a circular clock. Check a related YouTube video. For elements 21 to 40, I used a mnemonic strategy. For elements 41 to 120, I used my own memory technique. I call it memtholos. Now, I initially believed that improving the method used for encoding would be sufficient to create lasting memory. But in doing my testing, it became apparent that something even more important for long-term memory, which brings us to the third change that you and I need to make in our learning process: spacing. Now, Ebbinghaus concluded that identical relearning events should be distributed over time, with increasing intervals to produce the most effective recall of newly learned information. Now, this was later refined in 1932 by Cecil Alec Mace, a British philosopher and industrial psychologist, who refined the idea into the spacing effect, or spaced repetition. Now, the learning principle is quite simple, but I would argue very difficult to implement in a reliable sense in current learning systems at school or university or even in the workplace. Material would need to be studied on day one, and this is not passive reading of study material. The information is actively and strategically encoded using study strategies. Things like mind maps or clustering or past papers or mnemonics or the lateness system or the Feynman technique or active recall or even summary notes, to name a few. Now, inadvertently, this new learning material will decay rapidly. 40 minutes after your study, you're already going to forget between 40 to 60%. And that is exactly where you need to change how you study by introducing spacing. You need to plan your repetition. You need to plan your repetition. You need to desire knowledge like trying to find an oasis in a desert. 40 minutes after studying, revise it. 6 hours later, revise it again. 18 hours later, revise it again. 32 hours later, you guessed it, you revise it again. 7 days later, you're never going to guess. You revise it again. 31 days later, this is the last one I promise, you revise it again. Only once you've obtained between, say, 4 or 5 repetitions with the spacing, only then will you effectively encode the information into long-term memory. But even then, that information will decay over time. That's where my memtholos technique shines. It allows quick access to learned material, improving the revision efficiency and reducing the time spent to restore decayed memories. But more on that in a future video. So what can you do right now to improve your memory moving forward? Do these 3 things, and it wouldn't be a memory video if I didn't give you some sort of mnemonic. I'm just going to make one up on the spot. Let's go first. The first thing you need to do, F-I-R-S-T, checking the spelling, you need to focus intensely. See, F-I, you got that one? Focus intensely. You need to remember recency, so F-I-R. And the last one is space timely, S-T, first. Easy. Now, the next time you face a memory challenge, first, see what I did there? Resist the conclusion that you simply have bad memory. What you remember is shaped by how you pay attention, practice, and revise. In one ear, out the other, this can be solved with greater focus. New learning material fades rapidly, so take advantage of recency by reviewing it soon after you first encounter it. And if you value the newly acquired knowledge, return to revise the material with increasing intervals. Neglecting any of these stages, attention, early review, or spaced retrieval, can create the impression that your memory is poor. Often, however, the real problem is poor memory technique. Hopefully enjoyed that video, which brings up a whole different question. What is this channel, and what is this channel all about? Should you consider subscribing and liking the video? I founded this channel on one simple principle, that all of us have the ability to achieve our highest potential in life with only a few guiding principles. Hence the focus of the channel. Anything and everything that I deem to be helpful to others to unlock their full potential, I share on the channel. This video being a classic example of enhancing your memory. Pretty critical for all of our life functions. So if you found that useful, definitely consider liking and subscribing to the channel. If you find the technique works, maybe it's worth leaving a comment to help other members of the channel who discover your message. If it doesn't work, maybe also leave a comment, because then I can come up with some ideas of how to enhance the memory process even further. Well done there, stay tuned for the next video. Take it easy.